Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our air pump. That's going to be located right along the front of the engine towards the driver's side, extremely close to the air box. The first thing we're going to do is start disconnecting the wiring. So if you were to look down along the side right here, you're going to see the wiring that leads to that air pump. Now for this, I'm just going to carefully reach down. Looking at it, I can see that there's a red locking tab right where you can see my fingers at. I'm going to go ahead and pull this right out of there. Now once it's out, we're just going to go ahead and squeeze on the tab and pull this apart. Every time you disconnect an electrical connector, you want to give it a quick inspection. Make sure you don't see any funny colors. If you do, it's corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. That one looks fine, so I can set it aside. Now once you've inspected that wiring, the next thing I'm going to do is reach right down along the side of this, and you're going to find that some of your wiring is actually mounted to this metallic bracket for the pump. So I'm just going to get in between and carefully separate it. Now let's just use some hose clamp pliers. We're going to come right up in here. You can also use regular pliers if that's what you happen to have. Squeeze that clamp, slide it down and out of the way. Now let's go ahead and use a pick on this. We're going to carefully get in between the hose and the metal tube just to try to separate the two. Work our way around real quick. Grab onto that hose, go ahead and pull it right down. Now you want to give the hose a quick inspection. Make sure it doesn't look like it's dry rotted and cracked or damaged in any way. This one still looks good. Now the next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and remove the pump unit from its metallic bracket. Looking at the pump, you can see that you have a whole bunch of these rubber mounts. What I want to do is just make my way over towards this driver's side front one right here. I'm going to carefully get in between with a pry bar, and I'm going to gently try to separate the rubber mount from the pump unit. Once that's off of there, we can carefully grab onto this. We're going to give it a little wiggle and start separating these as well. Sometimes the rubbers can be stuck in there. Carefully grab onto that pump. We can lift it up and out of the vehicle so we can start our separation process. Careful for that wiring. Now for the separation process, what we actually need to do for this is to go ahead and separate the top area of this pump from the lower area. The lower area is the area that we're going to be replacing. So with that said, you're going to be looking for a whole bunch of mounting screws. These ones are a little bit hard to see, but they are actually a T25 Torx bit. So you're going to want something that looks just like this, essentially a star. Now for ours in particular, as you can tell, they're completely rotted. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a cutting wheel, and I'm going to cut them right off of there, essentially just cutting off the heads. Then we can pull the top off of this and get ready to put it onto the brand new pump. Now once you have all of your bolts out of there, the next thing I'm going to do is just carefully pry. I'm going to use a small screwdriver for this because I don't need to apply too much pressure. Essentially just find any place that you can get onto the pump area and the cover, and then just gently try prying in between. We're only trying to separate this, so I always try to work my way around as I go. It's got a pretty good seal on it here, so get that right off of there. Alright, now we can go ahead and set this part aside. We're going to hold onto this, we'll clean it up and get ready for our new pump. Now to clean up this top unit here, the areas that you want to pay attention to are all the areas that you can tell that you had the original gasket. It's going to be super important that all this area is clean and free of any debris so it can make a good seal and you don't have to worry about any moisture or debris making its way into the pump while you're driving. Alright, so at this point I cleaned this up the best I could. On my application, it seemed as though somebody used some sort of gasket maker on this, so it was extremely sticky and I couldn't necessarily get it all off the way that I would normally like to do. So, with that said, I'm going to continue on with the gasket. Now when you look at your gasket, you're going to see that you have a little ridge on it that needs to fit up and over this area right here. So you just want to go ahead and line that right up, and we can drop this into position. Now if you just take a quick look at how this is sitting on here, you can tell I went up and over this area. It comes in and around each of where all of the bolt holes are. That's something that's important to pay attention to. Now we can go ahead and grab onto our new pump assembly and we'll put it right onto here. You can see we have the areas that's going to line up right here. Just carefully slide it down and into position. Now we can turn it like this and start putting in our brand new mounting bolts. Start this one in. I'm going to leave it nice and loose, continue on doing the exact same thing to the other three. Once they're all started, we can go ahead and snug each of them up. Okay, now we can tighten them up. Go till it bottoms out. Just give it a teeny bit more. Obviously, we don't want to break our plastic. Give it a quick inspection, make sure everything's secured. This looks perfect. Now we can get ready to install this into the vehicle. In with your pump, you're going to notice that it came with some of this wiring loom, and it also came with an adapter for the wiring. Both of these are super important. The loom that you would use would go along this area of the wiring, so you just want to make sure that you still have loom on there. If it's damaged or it looks like it's ready to fall off, just go ahead and replace it and then tie it on there with some electrical tape. This one looks fine, so I'm not necessarily worried about that. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and take our little adapter here. You're going to notice it has two separate ends on it. This end right here is the end that's supposed to go down to the wiring that's originally in the vehicle. So all I want to do is go ahead and take this, I'm going to line it up and then latch it in. We'll listen for our click. We're going to give that a nice tug to make sure it's completely secured so no moisture or water or anything can make its way inside. Let's bring this down here underneath. That looks good. Just keep it right over here. Let's go ahead and get this in here. First, let's start with the wiring. We're going to want to have that wiring go in and down behind this area here so that we can connect it in along the air filter box. Slide that right down there. We'll get back to that in 1 minute. Now we're going to turn the pump so it's in this position overall. Essentially, you want to make sure that each of these three ears are lined up with their corresponding spots. Now what I typically do is I just grab onto the bushing, slide it out of the way. Just give it a little push like that. Now you can tell these two ears are ready to be lined up. Go ahead and squeeze them right in there to lock them in. If you needed to use a little bit of lubricant on this to push it in, it's completely up to you, but the more you add, the more chances this thing's going to just slip all over the place. Slide that one in there as well. Let's get this last one. All right, that feels pretty good. We're just going to give this a little wiggle. Make sure it's nice and secure. While I'm wiggling it, I'm making sure that this isn't just going to pop right out of there. I don't want it to fall apart while I'm driving down the road. Go ahead and connect in that wiring. Give it a little squeeze. Listen for that click. Give it a tug to make sure it's secure. Now, of course, you're going to want to make sure that this is also secured to that metal aspect down here of the bracket. I'm just going to go ahead and put it right down in there and press it into its corresponding hole. Go ahead and press that in. There we are. Make sure it's nice and secure. Let's go ahead and get this air hose on here now. Slide the clamp back up into its position. Let's get this up on here. Check that hose. Make sure it's completely secured. Okay, friends, we got our air pump in there. What's left to do now? Now, typically, you're going to want to go ahead and start up the vehicle, and you want to take a listen under the hood here for that air pump to turn on. Typically, that's only going to run for the first maybe 2 minutes of when you start it on the initial cold startup. If the vehicle's already warmed up, it shouldn't turn on at all. Aside from that, go ahead and check to make sure you don't have a check engine light, and then take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.